What up, everybody? It's Frank Muller back at it again with another video. Today, you're watching Level Up, Double Down, where we don't play around unless it's video games. So with that out the way, let's go ahead and get things started. On today's episode, we'll be looking at the WavePhoenix GameCube wireless adapter. Now, you might be asking yourself, what do you mean WavePhoenix adapter? Is that some kind of bootleg version of the Wavebird from back in the day? And you know what? You're right. Now, for those of you who weren't alive when the GameCube first released back in 2001, at that time, it was Nintendo's most powerful graphic-intensive console to launch. However, nowadays, Nintendo's bowed out of the console wars when it comes to graphics power, so they settled to just making games that are fun. But I remember when the GameCube launched. Although I didn't personally own one myself at the time, when I was in college, there were guys in my dorm who owned one, and what made me fall in love with the GameCube was Resident Evil 4 when that came out on that joint. Now, that in itself was what caused me to buy two of them secondhand, as you can see on display on my table. Now, if you want to see more content regarding modified GameCubes, since these two have been modified but using different methods and techniques, let me know in the comments below and I'll make that happen. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, when it comes to this review of this adapter you're about to see, it was all paid for with my own funds. The manufacturer, Lazy Bear Industries, they didn't offer me a sponsorship of any kind, nor has my video been pre-approved ahead of time, so there's no shilling on my part, just to make that clear. And no, I'm not endorsing for the company, just reviewing the product just to get that out the way. Now, Lazy Bear, let's have a talk. Come real close to the screen real quick if you don't mind. Now, if you want me to put out some recommendations for you on your behalf, a stack or two in my pocket would be nice, or we can negotiate it out, so feel free to hit me up on my Gmail. Now, what was I saying? Anyway, I took the time to do some B-roll footage of me using the adapter in the background while playing some game titles on the GameCube. As you might notice, from what I can tell, it operates as if it was a first-party adapter. Matter of fact, to be honest, not to glaze on Lazy Bear, but I think it actually operates even better than what the first-party adapter did. However, there were maybe one or two gripes I had about the adapter, but I'll say that to the end. Here's a PSA for anybody who's ever purchased or received a Wavebird controller secondhand. Story time here. Back in 2022, I was trying to buy another GameCube secondhand because I heard about the Pico mod method, and rather than ruin my first GameCube, which already had the Xeno mod chip successfully installed on it, I reached out to a guy on Facebook Marketplace who was selling the black GameCube I currently own. Along with the GameCube, the seller threw in a Wavebird controller as a consolation since he had no use for it, even though I was only intending to buy the GameCube by itself. Even though I got the controller as a bonus, I decided to keep it even if it didn't come with an adapter, since I figured it would come to good use sometime in the future. So that's the backstory, how I first received my Wavebird controller. However, on my way to the seller, I actually got involved in a car accident, and I know what you're thinking. No, it wasn't my fault, but that's a story for another day. Now, once I made it back home, I definitely had to clean out both the controller and the GameCube since they were dirty to say the least. Shout out to iFixit and the other YouTube videos I had to watch in order to take them apart at that time. Now, I said all that to say this. Always test the merchandise you buy before performing any kind of modifications, alterations, maintenance, or upkeep. Up until the point I received the WavePhoenix adapter, I had never put any batteries in the controller. So once I put the batteries in the controller for the first time, to my surprise, the controller never powered on. Oh my. Now, I was pissed off at first when I realized that, and I was unaware if I needed to buy another spare Wavebird controller on eBay, and I wasn't in the mood to spend any more money. Luckily, I didn't have to go that route because the root cause of the issue was actually the battery terminals on the controller. I thought it was a stretch to have to solder the actual battery terminals from the PCB of the controller, but once I did that, I had to let it sit in the bowl mixed with distilled vinegar and baking soda on top, which caused a mixture to bubble, which is nothing new if you've ever done a science project before where you had to make a volcano using baking soda and vinegar. Another thing I was lucky about was 5 months earlier, I had bought myself some solder wick, and that was very necessary in order to remove those battery terminals. Now, the one hindrance that I complained about at that time was that my solder iron had dulled out, so my penetration, pause, for the lack of a better word, was not as precise, and I had already bought myself a new solder iron made by a company named Kaiweets. They're spelled K-A-I-W-E-E-T-S. But the iron they sold me would never heat up, and it was supposed to be digital. So when I tried to reach out to that manufacturer to make a warranty claim, they had ghosted me after a few messages. So fuck those assholes, and don't ever buy from that company too. I'm serious. Don't buy from that company. Anyway, now, if any of you guys have any suggestions regarding the next solder iron I should buy from a reputable brand, please let me know in the comments. All right? Now, so words of advice. Always test the merchandise you buy as soon as you receive it. Even though I don't follow my own advice, do as I say, not as I do. Okay? Anyway. Oh, and one last thing. When putting the GameCube controller back together, don't forget to connect the hooks from the circuit board onto the hoops attached to the triggers, or none of the button presses you make from the triggers will register. If you know, you know. Now, from the beginning of the video, you might have noticed me pointing to the instructions included on the adapter where it tells you to hold down the X and Y buttons in order for the adapter to register the Wavebird controller. The funny thing is, I didn't even have to do all that for it to sync with my controller. It did it automatically after I pressed the button on the adapter and made a few button presses while the controller was turned on. Same situation happened on my other GameCube as well, so it wasn't a one-off situation. Now, your experience may be different from mine, so I don't want you guys expecting to have the same results. Now, after doing some background research, here's what I discovered, so let's look at how this adapter came to be. Now, this report comes courtesy of Time Extension, which goes into detail about the project being started by James Smith, aka loopj, which states the following. James Smith has created a solution. The open source WavePhoenix project allows you to build a replacement receiver less than $5. This receiver uses a cheap off-the-shelf wireless module, the RF BM-BG22C3, and this can either be hand-wired or assembled onto a custom PCB. Wavebirds are incredible controllers, but original receivers are getting harder to find and more expensive, says James. I'm hoping WavePhoenix gives a second life to Wavebirds whose owners have lost their receivers. All right, and here's a tweet from James stating the following, quote, I'm excited to finally release the first public version of WavePhoenix, my open source implementation of a Nintendo Wavebird receiver. All right. as I researched further, I noticed that Retro RGB, shout out to Bob, they did a write-up about it as well. So you can take the opportunity to look into that as well if you would like, since it just regurgitates the same talking points I've already made so far. All right. Now, here's the product page from Wavebird. As you can see, they have plenty in stock, so you can still order one from them without there being much wait times compared to when I ordered my adapter back in July. But due to the open source nature of this project by James, when I was randomly browsing through AliExpress, I noticed that there was another company throwing their hat in the ring, coming up with their own solution iteration of the WavePhoenix project as well. So if the version of AliExpress appeals to you, then by all means, shop from them as well, since I have no allegiance to any company and I feel as though competition is what makes products better. But keep in mind that the one on AliExpress appears to be in the pre-order phase from what I can tell. I'm pretty sure some of you guys are probably wondering, who is this item made for? Easy. If you're somebody who currently owns a Wavebird controller but lost the original adapter over time, this is for you. If you're a retro game collector, console connoisseur who happens to come across this Wavebird controller without an adapter, this is for you. If you're somebody who wants a replacement of the original Wavebird adapter, but you can't stomach the high prices they're going for on merchant trading platforms like eBay or at local pawn shops or retro game shops, then this is for you. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, I saved your favorite part of the episode up until this point, my gripes regarding this project, and I wonder who didn't see that coming. Now, this adapter requires there to be somewhat direct line of sight for it to function properly. For example, I was sitting in front of my computer, which is 10 feet away from the GameCube where it's positioned with the adapter connected, but I was turned to the side facing my computer while playing, and I noticed there were times when it wouldn't register some of my button presses that I made, so keep that in mind. Also, this may not be the fault of WavePhoenix, but when I try to play Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island using an emulator that I have installed on my GameCube, I got the following error messages on screen. How in the hell does this emulator recognize that a wired controller is not connected directly to the GameCube? You gotta be fucking kidding me. I know, that might sound like a slight overreaction, but still, this game came out in '96. I remember owning it when I was a kid, but what kind of shit is that when Nintendo won't even allow you to use a wireless game controller to play a Mario game emulated on a GameCube? Alright, let me stop before I get myself worked up, alright? Now, as I wrap up this video, feel free to let me know in the comments what you thought about the presentation that I gave so far. Also, if you're amongst the customers who've already purchased the WavePhoenix adapter, share your experience to let everybody know what you thought about it and whether or not you would recommend it to anybody else. Also, don't forget to share my video as well. I'm just saying. Just speaking for myself, I would recommend this product. Why else would I do this video? But also, the Wavebird controller that I have, it never came with an adapter, so I fit the archetype or person that this product was geared towards according to James. So, until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and share. Again, this is Frank Muller signing out. Holla at me.